Hi everybody, Sonia here again. Um, so in this module, I want to introduce a powerful structure or model for teaching writing, and that is the Writer's Workshop. And I have to say, when I first started teaching, it wasn't something that was really discussed in my education program. Reading was discussed a lot, but writing really wasn't. And so I spent the first few years of my career not feeling very confident about teaching writing. And it wasn't until I was teaching at the United Nations School in New York, and we did a professional book group inquiry at that school, and we read a book together, and then we talked about how to implement that in the classroom. And so I'm going to introduce the book to you. The book was The Art of Teaching Writing by Lucy Calkins. And you will see Lucy Calkins discussed in many schools today. This workshop model is used in many schools, but I hadn't heard of it at that time. This book, when was it first published? Let me take a look. So, The Art of Teaching Writing was first published in 1986, so it has been around for a while. It's an older book, but it still has a lot of wealth of really, really valuable information. So I'm just going to discuss a little bit about why a workshop approach and what components are involved in a workshop approach to writing, because it's going to be really central to our course. And I'm using this as a mentor text, a text for you to learn from. And I'm going to do a little bit of a read aloud of some of the text. And the part that I'm going to read aloud to you is actually from a chapter that is on establishing a predictable workshop environment. Okay, so I used to think that in order to teach creative writing, I needed to have a creative lesson plan. I thought creative environments, by definition, were ever changing, complex, and stimulating. And I can really relate to this because that's what I thought too. Every day, my classroom was different. One day we wrote for 10 minutes, another day not at all. Sometimes youngsters published their writing, sometimes they didn't. The classroom was a whirlwind, a kaleidoscope, and I felt very creative. Rightly so. My days were full of planning, scheming, experimenting, replanning. Meanwhile, my children waited on my changing agendas. They could not develop their own rhythms and strategies because they were controlled by mine. They could not plan because they never knew what tomorrow would hold. They could only wait. I finally realized that the most creative environments in our society are not kaleidoscope environments in which everything is always changing and complex. They are instead the predictable and consistent ones. The scholar's library, the researcher's laboratory, the artist's studio. Each of these environments is deliberately kept predictable and simple because the work at hand and the changing interactions around that work are so unpredictable and complex. Our teaching changes when we turn our classrooms into writing workshops. Instead of planning each day's new activities and assignments, we need to anticipate how we will initiate, scaffold, and guide the classroom community towards an ever deepening involvement. And we need to select rituals, arrangements, and classroom structures. This is no small challenge. Time for writing. That's hugely important, right? So when we talk about a writing workshop, we're setting aside a really predictable time for children to do writing in the classroom. And a writing workshop also has a predictable structure. It doesn't have to look exactly the same in everybody's classroom, but that predictability is part of it for our students. So, setting aside predictable time for writing is important. If children know that every morning will begin with an hour of writing, or that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoons will be for writing, then they can anticipate and plan for their own writing. They can use the time away from the desk to gain distance on a draft, to consider their choices, to mull over possibilities. Last night in bed, I thought of a better lead to my story, they tell us. When I was at the movies, I figured out how to end my book, they say. Then, too, when children know the parameters within which they are working, they can be more strategic, more deliberate writers. If they know they'll be writing tomorrow, they are more apt to say, I'll just write a sketchy draft for now, and tomorrow I'll redo that section, or the sections that are weak. They can make plans to confer with a friend, or put aside a piece of writing. But if the writing workshop is always changing, always haphazard, children remain pawns waiting for their teacher's agenda. So in this chapter, Lucy Calkins goes on to explain a little bit about what are the basic structures of a writing workshop. And I'm going to give you those few pages to read yourself. And I'm going to give you another online resource that's going to help you to see what a writing workshop, what the structure of a writing workshop might look like. But I also want you to remember that it's going to look different in every classroom. So for instance, I've used writing workshops with my graduate students in the writing class that I do as part of the master's program here. And I've also used writing workshop with second graders who are just starting out in second grade. And of course, those look really, really different. But there's some basic structures that are really fundamental and important to Writers' Workshop. And I'm even thinking my daughter Emma, who you may hear me tell lots of stories about, she's in 7th grade right now, and her teacher, she uses a writing workshop structure. My daughter is in a contained special ed classroom. Some of the children don't speak. My daughter uses a communication device. The children have different learning styles. But even in that special education classroom, they do a workshop approach. The children write about things that were important to them. The children share their writing with each other. The teacher explicitly teaches them things that will help with their writing. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that it's not just an approach that gets used in elementary classrooms. It can be used all over.